On this Saturday night, fallout after the U.S. blocks a demand for a ceasefire in Gaza. With reports nearly half of Gazans are starving.
We need more access. We need to get into Gaza.
Desperation mounts, and another Hamas hostage dies. Far-right concerns following the arrest of 2 Atomwaffen members in Canada.
They were very good at attracting young, disaffected individuals.
Why authorities are growing nervous. A hero's welcome home in Manitoba for the new AFN chief. But Cindy Woodhouse's new job will be anything but easy. And from mania to mourning, Shohei Otani says no to the Jays and yes to the Dodgers for a reportedly astronomical deal.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. The World Food Programme says half the population of Gaza is starving and is urging Israel and the international community to significantly increase the amount of aid entering the besieged enclave. Israel says it's preparing a system to allow more aid to get through, but onlookers say the plan isn't enough. The pleas come as fighting rages inside Gaza for a 10th week. The Hamas-run Health Ministry says a barrage of Israeli airstrikes killed dozens more today, pushing the death toll in Gaza to more than 17,700 since October 7th. Adding to the devastation, anger growing inside and outside Gaza over the United States' decision to veto a call for a ceasefire in the conflict. Redmond Shannon has tonight's top story and a warning. Some of the details and images in this report are disturbing.
Another scene of devastation and death in Khan Yunis as Gaza's second city is flanked by Israeli tanks and troops. The result of the latest airstrikes is measured in bodies and etched on the faces of survivors. This man says the US-made weapons support Israel's killing of our women, children and elderly, adding that America's veto at the United Nations targets innocent people in Gaza.
En contra. Against.
On Friday, the United States was the only nation among the 15-member UN Security Council to vote against a resolution calling for a ceasefire, saying a full ceasefire was unrealistic. It is one of 5 permanent members that can veto. The UK abstained. Turkish leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan led the condemnation. He said a just world is possible, but not with America, calling for reforms within the UN. Palestinian leader in the occupied West Bank, Mahmoud Abbas, said the vote makes the US complicit with Israeli war crimes. Israel denies targeting civilians. Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu thanked the US for its veto, saying other countries should understand that a ceasefire would just prevent the elimination of Hamas. The UN's World Food Programme says this ongoing war inside an area walled off from the world is like no other.
Half of the population are starving. 9 out of 10 are not eating every day. I mean, obviously the needs are massive.
Deputy Director Carl Scow says Israel must allow for the full opening of the larger Kerem Shalom border crossing, rather than Israel's plan to use it as a staging post.
We have food available in Egypt and in Jordan to reach some 1 million people in 1 month. And so, we are ready to roll.
Israel is paying a price for this war too. An Israeli news report says 2,000 soldiers have sustained life-changing injuries since October 7th. More than 400 have been killed. On Saturday, one of the kibbutz communities attacked on October 7th said that one of its kidnapped residents has been confirmed dead. On Friday, Hamas claimed 25-year-old Sahar Baruch was killed in a failed rescue attempt. Colleen?
Redmond Shannon in London. Thanks, Redmond. A surprise meeting in Ottawa today as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly welcomed a delegation of foreign ministers from Saudi Arabia, Turkey and the Palestinian Authority. The talks weren't disclosed to the media until after the meeting was over. They're said to have been focused on the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and possible pathways forward. The delegation of Islamic and Arab nations has made similar stops in China, Russia, the UK, France and the US, with a stated goal of bringing a ceasefire to the war. Two men will appear in a Toronto courtroom Monday after being charged earlier this week with terrorism offences. The pair from southern Ontario are allegedly associated with a violent neo-Nazi group known as Atomwaffen Division. It's the third time this year RCMP have arrested alleged members of the far-right group. As David Akin reports, it's a growing concern not just to Canadian law enforcement, but to agencies around the world.
One of the things that is unfortunate about Atomwaffen is they were very good at marketing, very good at attracting young, disaffected individuals with videos like this.
This Atomwaffen video was shown earlier this year at a conference of researchers and others combating hate-fueled violence. Global News has learned that the RCMP have discovered similar videos made by Canadian Atomwaffen members. In fact, the RCMP arrested two men last July accused of creating and distributing these images, which were released by the RCMP at the time of the July arrest. Just like in these U.S. videos, RCMP sources say the videos its investigators have obtained show Atomwaffen members in Canada with weapons and body armor burning Canadian, U.S. and Israeli flags. Atomwaffen has been a listed terrorist entity in Canada since 2021. Public Safety Canada says Atomwaffen's members, most of whom are young white men, call for acts of violence against racial, religious, and ethnic groups, also against police and bureaucrats. In an attempt to avoid Canadian anti-terrorist laws, some Atomwaffen members have tried to essentially rebrand themselves as Active Club Canada. On Friday, as the RCMP announced the new arrests, investigators released this photo with faces blurred of participants in an Active Club Canada combat training exercise at an unknown location.
30 seconds to zero time.
Atomwaffen was founded in 2013 in the United States, where Atomwaffen members have been linked to 5 murders. The group has since expanded to the UK, to Germany, and to Canada. Because of that international element, CSIS is closely collaborating with the RCMP to share information about the group's activities here and abroad. David Akin, Global News, Ottawa.
A salmonella outbreak across this country has now claimed 5 lives. The infections are linked to a brand of cantaloupes sold in October and November. The number of confirmed cases has nearly doubled in the last week. 129 people in Canada have been diagnosed with salmonella linked to the outbreak. Most of the cases are in Quebec, 17 are in Ontario, 15 in BC, PEI, New Brunswick and Newfoundland and Labrador each have 2 confirmed cases. Heidi Petracek reports on what Canadians are being urged to do and the symptoms to watch for.
The salmonella outbreak connected to Malachita and Rudy brand cantaloupes worries consumers.
I do like cantaloupe. It's just when I heard about the outbreak, I just stopped buying it until they resolve the issue.
Very disappointed if you're getting sick eating food you think safe.
The contamination detected during routine government testing of cantaloupe from Mexico. The Public Health Agency won't give any details on the 5 people who died, but says most of those sick are either 65 or older or aged 5 and younger.
And with that does come some individuals who report residing in a long-term care facility, a retirement home, or attending daycare.
Affected whole cantaloupe, cut cantaloupe, and other products containing it are now recalled. Canadians urged not to eat it and to throw out any fresh or frozen product they may have.
It can survive in the environment. It can be passed from person to person, passed into food.
Salmonella bacteria can also pass between the hands and mouth. Symptoms of infection start within 6 to 72 hours of consumption and include chills, fever, nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, stomach cramps, and sudden headache.
And those sort of dehydration effects you get can be lethal.
3 people have also died in the United States in connection with the outbreak, and 230 people are reported sick. One American food safety lawyer says there are likely many more.
The CDC estimates that for every one person counted, there's about 40 other people who were sickened. So do the math.
As Canadians now take a closer look into their fridges. Heidi Petrachik, Global News, Halifax.
Fresh off an election win, the new Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse says she's ready to get to work. Woodhouse getting a hero's welcome upon returning to Manitoba Friday. She's the 3rd national chief from Manitoba and the 2nd woman to lead the political advocacy organization. But the job isn't easy. She'll have to balance regional interests internally while presenting a united First Nations front to the federal government. Melissa Ridgen reports.
To those who know Cindy Woodhouse, her victory this week comes as little surprise. Her entire life built for this moment and this role.
The political blood, I'll say, from my family.
Her father, a former chief of Penamatang First Nation, 3 hours north of Winnipeg.
He ran for chief when I was 4 years old.
Woodhouse's great-great-great-grandfather, Richard Woodhouse, a signatory to Treaty 2 in 1871. She's spent her life in these circles, finding common ground, making deals, and says she understands the grassroots demand that the AFN remember its roots as a resistance movement.
If you don't listen to our people, you don't listen to our chiefs, you don't answer them, then there's problems. And so to Canada, we're coming for you. Yeah.
Previously the AFN's regional chief from Manitoba, Woodhouse is a known presence among federal politicians.
It's exciting that she's got such a good experience in both being a regional chief, but also in many of the files that I as a minister am responsible for.
The housing crisis and securing supports for addiction issues and mental health will be her first priorities, along with the $23 billion child welfare settlement she helped negotiate for First Nations victims of the historic child welfare system.
How that money is going to be distributed, how it's going to flow out into the communities is a big question.
Also top of mind will be mending fences inside the AFN after the tense removal of her predecessor, Roseanne Archibald, last year.
Let's come together and let's be the powerful, united AFN that we are, were, and will be.
Long-term, Woodhouse has her sights set beyond the Ottawa power bubble.
To Canada and to Canadians, we need your support. You have to work with First Nations people in a good way. We are here in a good way.
Calling for a true partnership, as her ancestor intended in signing that treaty 150 years ago. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
A 30-hour filibuster finally comes to an end. Coming up, the winners and losers in the fight over the carbon tax.
Monsieur Trudeau. Mr. Macaulay-Cardigan. Mr. Sajjan.
Cheers and applause drowned out part of what was the final vote in a marathon session on Parliament Hill last night. After nearly 30 hours of non-stop voting, MPs were finally able to leave the House of Commons just after 11:30 p.m. Round-the-clock voting began on Thursday as Conservatives delivered on their promise to stall the government's agenda unless it agrees to scrap part of its carbon tax, a tactic the Liberals have called ridiculous and an abuse of process. Mercedes Stevenson has more government reaction on that filibuster. Mercedes.
Colleen, as we near the end of this year's parliamentary sitting, the federal government would like nothing more than to be out promoting their new draft framework for a cap on oil and gas emissions. But instead, they were sidetracked this week by a Conservative filibuster over the federal carbon tax. While MPs were engaged in a marathon voting session, we managed to secure an interview with Energy and Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson in between rounds of vote after vote after vote in the House. Here's what he had to say about the Conservatives' delay tactics.
What's going on in the House right now is an abuse of parliamentary process. It may be technically allowed under the law or under the rules, but I would tell you that there is no other workplace in Canada that would actually allow people to be treated the way that members of Parliament are being treated.
The Liberals are not only playing defense in the chamber, they are also on the defensive over their new oil and gas emissions cap outside the House. The oil and gas sector, as well as the provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan, have been criticizing the plan as a backdoor cap on production.
Well, I would say if you listen to the criticism, there were certainly some in the sector who think it goes too far. There were certainly some in the environmental community who don't think it goes far enough. At the end of the day, we worked very hard to ensure that we were designing this approach focusing on emissions. That is within the federal government's ambit from a constitutional perspective. It was not focused on addressing production, because that falls within a provincial jurisdiction. If you look at what we have done, we looked at what are the technically feasible emissions reductions that you can achieve between now and 2030.
Environmental groups have also been critical of the Liberals' approach, and as a reminder, just last month, Canada's Environment Commissioner said the Liberals aren't on track to meet their own 2030 emissions targets. Colleen?
Mercedes Stevenson in Ottawa. Thanks, Mercedes. And you can watch her full interview with Minister Wilkinson on tomorrow's West Block right here on Global. Canada has joined a coalition of a dozen nations to publish an inventory of their own fossil fuel subsidies within a year. The Dutch-led commitment was made at COP28 in Dubai. The aim is to create a clear strategy for eliminating them. According to Environmental Defence, the Government of Canada has provided nearly $13 billion in subsidies to oil and gas companies in this country so far this year. The European Union has clinched a deal on the world's first comprehensive laws to regulate the use of artificial intelligence. The landmark deal came after more than 36 hours of negotiations between European Parliament and EU member states. The proposed agreement includes safeguards on the use of AI, as well as limitations on its adoption by law enforcement. It also details a consumer complaint process and possible fines for violations. If passed, the legislation wouldn't take effect until 2025. Ahead, Blue Jays fans' dreams dashed as arguably the world's greatest player signs with LA. The Toronto Blue Jays and the team's fans may have just had their biggest disappointment of the season before it even begins. Baseball phenom Shohei Otani has signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers, striking one of the biggest contracts in pro sports history. As Mike Drolet reports, it turns out all the Toronto speculation over the last 24 hours was way off base.
A short fly ball away from the Rogers Centre, the TVs and all the talk are tuned to the only topic that matters, in the baseball world at least, Shohei Otani. Otani to Toronto seemed like a home run on Friday.
Blue Jays on top, baby. We're getting Shohei. We're going to the World Series next year.
And why wouldn't he think that? Baseball insiders tweeted Otani was on his way. Even the control tower at the airport believed it.
Very warm welcome to everybody that may or may not be on board to Toronto.
But baseball can be fickle. The plane was actually carrying businessman Robert Herjavec, who had some fun with it. And the same insider who said Otani was on his way put up a retraction. The Friday buzz became the Saturday hangover.
But it sounds like you don't want to get your hopes up.
No, that's actually it, because it would be like like if it doesn't work out.
And then, just after 3 p.m., the other shoe dropped. Otani posted, "I've decided to choose the Dodgers as my next team." It's what many had expected in the first place, but nobody predicted this. A 10-year, $700 million contract. That's $70 million a year. To put it in perspective, the top-paid NHL player, Colorado's Nathan MacKinnon, will earn $12.6 million this year. But in the baseball economy, Otani may actually be worth it. He not only pitches and hits, Otani is one of the most marketable athletes in the world. Even if he's so private, he won't divulge the name of his dog. Won't you stay? Toronto fans have been down this road before. In 2019, the NBA's Raptors were the reported frontrunners to re-sign Kawhi Leonard. For days, he was followed everywhere, until he ultimately decided, that's right, to play in Los Angeles.
Oh well, it was fun while it lasted. Mike Trelay, Global News, Toronto.
Finding opportunity in adversity, a BC man's motivation to change the world. Next. He lost his business in the pandemic, then he lost his home. But a Vancouver Island man has found his purpose in a full-time, unpaid job that few of us would even consider. Now, as Kylie Stanton reports, what began as a local opportunity could become something much bigger.
Just walk the trench. And getting the garbage out means putting the work in. I treat it like a military operation. And the schedule is just as rigid. The last 4 months, I've been doing it consistently for every day, 8 hours a day. There it is. It's the full-time job Jason Perry created for himself after the COVID-19 pandemic shuttered his business. Yeah, I was a woodworker, like a cabinet builder. The company was the first to go. His home followed. But Perry saw the misfortune as an opportunity to give back. Whew. It's creating positive energy when I'm doing it. That's kind of one of the missions. And what goes around? One time I found like 25 bucks. Comes around. People will stop and give me 10 bucks, 20 bucks. I appreciate that hugely. Every honk, validation. I get rate motivated and I'll play the air guitar for them, everything. Perry plans on taking his mission on the road this spring, making it from one end of Vancouver Island to the other, in hopes of raising awareness for the homeless while putting an end to the stigma. I kind of want to create an organization doing it, and if I can do that, then I'll do the country the year after. Getting her. As the saying goes, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Treasure hunt. And it seems in all of this, Perry has found his purpose. I believe the less garbage people see on their travels, the happier they'll be when they get to their destination. I love it. Kylie Stanton, Global News.
Thanks for being an inspiration, Jason Perry. And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Colleen Christie. Tonight's Your Canada is this chubby fox squirrel in Regina, Saskatchewan. We love seeing Your Canada. Please keep emailing your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Good night.